don't know why they would attack a person. If there's a nest close by and you're just walking or
I guess that might
close
be it.
or...
Yeah, so I'm thinking of all the wild animals that could potentially kill you if you were sleeping outside in Arizona. Rattlesnakes.
An owl wouldn't be sort of on the top of my list.
Owls. I just think of owls.
Rattlesnake or Gila monster.
Gila monster.
Yeah.
Google that. Deadly animals in Arizona.
Do it. So the campus at Taliesin West evolved over the 2 decades that Wright traveled from Wisconsin each season. It was one of his masterpieces and one of the first major works in the last quarter century of his life.
Oh my God, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Gila monster, rattlesnake,
mm-hmm.
Africanized bee,
Mm-mm.
Arizona bark scorpion.
Ew.
Tarantulas?
Yeah, I don't...
Hell no, I am never going to Arizona.
I don't think I want to be building my own little pod in the desert and sleeping out there either.
Nope.
Because what do you do to keep all that stuff away?
Nope.
Even if you're elevated. Anyway, we won't think about that. The desert structures are immediately identifiable as Wrightian, and as such do not fall under a specific style of architecture. Wright himself said, quote, "Our Arizona camp is something one can't describe and just doesn't care to talk about," unquote.
Okay.
Well, we care to talk about it because we're doing a podcast about it and him, and can try our best to describe it with a little help from the National Park Service nomination form. Thanks, NPS.
Yes. Is it
now the nomination form?
Right.
Okay. So here we go. Here's a little disclaimer. The information on the Park Service nomination form is excellent, but it's from the 80s. So
it's very brief.
I did update or just double check some things with the Gunny Harbaugh, who's the architect from Chicago that is doing the current or did the most recent preservation master plan for Taliesin. And there's a section in their summary that includes some of the information I'm sharing with you. So also thanks to...
You say that report's like 500 pages long?
No. So the summary is like 37 pages, and the full master plan, preservation plan for Taliesin West is 740 pages. So no, I did not read that, but I just wanted to give a shout out to both the Park Service and Harbaugh Architects in Chicago, who they're excellent. They've done a ton of stuff, who did the master plan and allowed me to provide information that is more updated than the 1980-something nomination form. We are talking about the Arizona camp. And as I mentioned, the Taliesin West is bound to its site, just like Taliesin East, although the terrain could not be more different. The walls of Taliesin West were built mostly from volcanic rock taken from the surrounding area. Some of the boulders on the site, not part of the building, just in the landscape, feature petroglyphs made by the first permanent settlers of the area called the Hohokam people. Wright discovered the boulders during the first phase of construction and had them moved to specific locations as part of his master plan. The rocks used for construction of the walls and fireplaces were set in wooden forms and then set in a special mortar of cement and desert sand. Furniture was designed by Wright to complement the architecture. Wright's famous Cherokee red paint was used inside and out on the exposed redwood structure. Although the redwood was not locally sourced, it was scored with the saguaro cactus motif, allowing it to adopt the property of a familiar desert plant. Wright was inspired by the Arizona landscape and drew on the flora and fauna of the area to inform the design and motifs of Taliesin West. Besides the saguaro cactuses, he found inspiration in the patterns of the Gila monster, rattlesnake, chameleon, and other
deadly animals,
cactus species. Not the scorpion. The scorpion was not mentioned. Although...
Or the tarantula.
A stylized scorpion would make a really cool Frank Lloyd Wright motif. Just saying. Taliesin West encompasses spaces supporting live, work, and play, all on several axes and representing different decades. The original, that is 1938, main core includes the drafting studio, kitchen, dining room, and personal office of Wright, loggia, kiva, or cinema, and guest apartments. The sleeping quarters of Wright and his wife were slightly removed. I think they called this the sun something or other, but it was altered and added onto, and it no longer exists. So if you look at how the plan has grown over time, it started with just a few kind of core essential structures, and they were out there every year between 1938 and 1959, and then it still exists today. So there's been a lot of changes at Taliesin West. The rooms were all kept low to the ground, allowing natural ventilation and protection from the brutal desert heat. The Wright dwelling and studio were originally a series of boxes around a private terrace. They were connected to public spaces through terraces, gardens, and pools. This design approach continued as the campus grew, and is also kind of a familiar treatment of Wrights, that you would have different parts of a whole that were linked by some, clever, intentionally landscaped or hardscaped design. Wright would add new living quarters for he and his wife. At this point, it's what's her face, the dancer. What's her name? Ogivanna. Mm-hmm. A larger dining room, apprentice court, guest deck, music pavilion, and cabaret theater. The cabaret theater was excellently designed, and it is said the acoustics are so perfect you can hear someone whisper from the stage when seated at the opposite side of the space. Although the beauty of the architecture has and will stand the test of time, some of the materials used in the construction of Taliesin West and subsequent alterations have not. One specific example is the canvas roof of the original studio. Wright loved the luminescence that the sun created when shining through the canvas, but he did not love having to replace material every 2 years because of the toll the climate took on it. After Wright's death, his wife asked the Legacy Fellows, these are the last living Frank Lloyd Wright apprentices, and this is post-1959, to install air conditioning since she was spending more time at the property. So just think, between 38 and Wright's death in 59, Taliesin West was never conditioned. And I guess it's because they were there, right, from November to March or April. Yeah, so it gets cold, but still, right, there's nothing, there's no air. That means there's no air for the rest of the time when the building just sits there.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, big problem.
Yep. Although not part of Wright's original plan, it is realistic that accommodations for conditioning the space were bound to be needed at some point. Natural materials don't last forever and require upkeep. Over time, there were also electrical, plumbing, and structural issues. This all raises a preservation practice question. Taliesin West was a winter camp for Wright and his apprentices and is now a museum and active school. It is used year-round, and a comprehensive preservation master plan has to respect and maintain all periods of significance, not just the main one when Wright was alive, but also accommodate current and future uses. As a result of these significant issues facing the property, the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation commissioned a preservation master plan. This is the one that Harbo Architects did, available on their website for review and input. According to the summary, the intent of the preservation master plan is to address 4 items. 1. Identify what needs to be preserved or restored and why. 2. Identify the level of preservation or restoration required for each of the individual components of Taliesin West and what would be acceptable alternatives. 3. Develop a magnitude of estimated cost to fully preserve or restore Taliesin West. And 4. Develop a prioritization of recommended future studies and restoration treatments for the individual building components at Taliesin West. Also, since Frank Lloyd Wright designed in his head and ordered builders around with his cane, there are no original drawings of Taliesin West, just sketches on butcher paper. And interestingly, butcher paper, which we all know is brown and matte finish,
right,
was used because of the bright sun. Like, you're out there sketching. You don't want paper that's highly reflective and is going to blind you when you draw.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So, genius. Anyway,
He was a genius.
The breakdown of what Taliesin West needs is incredibly detailed and an extremely informative read for someone in or out of the preservation field. I found it was pretty accessible. Again, I read the summary. I did not read 740 pages. And I would definitely recommend, if you care about Frank Lloyd Wright architecture archives, museums, preservation, really anything. Like, it's very interesting. Just the summary is worth a read. And like I said, the full preservation master plan is 740 pages in case you need something for your next book club, which I don't think I would even stick that on my ladies.
I'm sure they appreciate that.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. And the way that it was written, because it was so accessible, it was very inspirational just for me in writing. When I do scopes of work for projects, it was just a really cool way to see what other preservation architects, like how they write and interpret the Secretary of Interior standards in a building as valuable and timeless as Taliesin West.
Right. And Frank is actually buried at Taliesin West.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
Like his ashes are somewhere?
Yeah, he basically...
Because there's not a cemetery.
Yeah, right. So he died in 1959 at the age of 91.
God, he was an old codger.
He was. And still kind of a badass, though. You see pictures of him like in his 70s wearing these
I know,
glasses.
the cape and the hat and the everything. I know. As bad a human as he was, like, I cannot diminish
his sense of style.
Just anything about his design philosophy. Like, I really respect everything he stood for as far as architecture. And yeah, he's super famous. And even if you're not in architecture, you're like, oh yeah, Frank Lloyd Wright. But he was just so amazing. And he has that sort of cachet for a reason.
Right. And so he was originally laid to rest in the Lloyd Jones family cemetery near Unity Church in Wisconsin. Yeah. Both the original Taliesin and Taliesin West reverted to the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, which was overseen by Wright's wife, Giovanna.
Okay.
Now, when she died in 1985...
God, that's late.
Yeah. She wanted to be cremated. She wanted Frank to be cremated, and she wanted their daughter, Svetlana, to be cremated as well.
Oh, wow.
And laid to rest in a memorial garden at
but he was already buried somewhere else.
Right.
So did she have him exhumed?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so members of the Taliesin Fellowship had his body exhumed, cremated, and sent to Arizona without his family's permission.
I was just going to say, can she do that? She did.
She did.
She did it.
Several of his children were still alive at the time and expressed outrage over this desecration.
Ugh.
Now, to this day, his original marker remains at Unity Church in Wisconsin, but the grave is empty. So, even in death,
but how was she allowed to do that?
I think
if he had family, if he had children or grandchildren that were
still alive,
as of course they were.
I think she did it kind of secretly.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing his
and it's
grave.
Very interesting. Several of his children became architects, and even his grandson.
Okay,
today is
I think I knew that. That's not Eric, is it?
I think that you are correct.
Okay.
We have two Frank Lloyd Wright houses in South Carolina. Old Brass, which is termed a plantation here in South Carolina, even though it was built way after plantation era, and that's outside of Yamasee. And I believe that the current owner had some guest houses built on the property, and they were designed by Eric Lloyd Wright. So it's actually Joel Silver, the Hollywood producer, who owns it, and he has done a lot for that property.
Yeah, he has.
Reassembled.
Well, and rebuilt, right, because they had drawings for stuff that was never built, so he's kind of completing the property, and there was a major fire in the barn, so he was able to rebuild based on original specifications and drawings.
And I think most importantly, has reassembled most of the original furnishings that Wright designed for the house.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, he's done a lot for that property. Working for the State Historic Preservation Office, we got to take a private tour of the property because he was building basically a car barn for all his cars.
Wow!
So we had to go out there and review.
Oh, to make sure. Yeah, that's just down the road a little bit.
Yeah, but so certainly took them up when they were like, "Well, you can come down and take a look and make sure it's okay."
Yeah,
we're like, "Sure." So
Nice.
yeah. So yeah, that's Frank Lloyd Wright.
Well,
And
some of